Great. So just starting off in a general way, how and when did you first meet Anne Crowden?
Well, the very first day that she came to Berkeley, she had been touring with, for quite a few years, she had been in the Netherlands Chamber Orchestra with Simon Goldberg. Mm-hmm. And before that, of course, she was in the Edinburgh String Quartet. But then she went to Holland, and she'd been with them for several years, and her plan was to tour with them in this country. They had a tour, and the last concert was in Berkeley, and her plan was to stay after that. She knew Ian Hampton, Colin Hampton. Colin was the cellist of the Gorilla Quartet, which was here in residence, and Ian had been the cellist of the Edinburgh Quartet, and he had moved to Berkeley, and then ultimately went to Canada, and that's where he is now. But yeah, so they played the last concert. We were having a big chamber music party. You know, what that means is a whole lot of chamber musicians with the house, and there was a lot of food and a lot of playing. Just, you know, you play all night pretty much. So Anne came and joined us and started playing with us. So that was all big, different people playing, and that's how it started and how it went on from there. Yeah, absolutely. And so she stayed in the area, you know, and people started helping her find work and find a place to live and things like that. So it evolved from there. Yeah.
Lovely. I'm wondering if you have any personal or musical anecdotes you'd like to share about Anne and that time.
Yeah, you'd have to. There's so many, you know. I mean, because she was such a lively person and full of fun. Deirdre, her daughter, who's now a wonderful cellist, was I don't know, maybe 5 or 6, something. She was very young, I remember. And Anne did everything in those early days. I mean, she played, because she had to get work, she had to support herself. And she played in the opera orchestra, San Francisco Opera. She played down at, what was it? There was a restaurant down on Solano that was run by musicians.
Old Spaghetti Factory?
No. That was in San Francisco.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah, Old Spaghetti Factory. We all played there at Hungry Eye, all these places, you know. And so she was very much in with that whole chamber music crowd. All of us, you know, who were very active in the Bay Area at that point. And so, you know, she was, and she started teaching also, and you know, it evolved. I don't know. It's hard for me to say how many years that she was doing very miscellaneous things, but it was quite, I mean, musical things, but it was quite a few years, because I think Deirdre was probably already in high school by the time she started thinking about the school and that kind of thing. But she played with us a lot, you know, with my trio. We had the Francesco trio was starting and then active, and then sometimes we would have guests to play quintets or so on, and we always loved playing with Anne. So, and then when we had our residency at Stanford, we got her to be part of the chamber music program there. So we sort of took her around every place we could and go, because she was such a joy to play with and work with, and fun and lively, and was a great one for chamber music parties. And we had those, you know, where you just go and play all night, as I say, you know. So it was just the Berkeley life. But she immediately, it was sort of a natural somehow. She just fit into the whole community of that time, and that must have been in the 60s, I suppose, something like that. I can't remember exactly, but in the 60s, all through that time. When did the school start?
In 83.
Okay, well then that's quite a few years before the school starts, and she taught more and more. She became very much in demand as a teacher, and it was through some of her. Well, there were several reasons. Probably we can get to that, but why the school started being in her consciousness and her desire, because she found that with her students, they just didn't have chunks of time to practice, and it wasn't part of it. It was sort of in the cracks. It wasn't part of their school life or part of their, you know, activity life. So it was a natural evolution. But before that, though, she was just very active, doing everything. in terms of, oh, I don't know, it's hard to say. There would be riotous moments, but it's hard to say, you know, pull them up right now. I remember particularly one, that, well, as she remembered, we were rehearsing a quintet with David Abel, the violinist of the trio at that time, and it was Nancy Ellis, who became a member of her quartet, of Anne's quartet. She had a quartet with Deirdre played, and I don't remember exactly. I better not talk about that because I get my facts wrong, who were the regular members. But I remember we were playing a quintet, and David sometimes would play with this very, very smoky sound, you know, up on the G string on the violin, and I ran out to the side and got a fire extinguisher and gave it to Anne and said, "Don't you think you better put that fire out?" So she always remembered that as being a kind of a particularly funny moment. But anyway, it was always lively with her, you know, and you know, she had so much energy and life and enthusiasm, and was also a very, very supportive musician. You know, it was always wonderful to work with her in that sense, because she really appreciated, I mean, she knew the real thing, and she had done it for a lot of years and on a very serious professional level in Europe and in Scotland and England and so on. And so that people that were going after the highest values, that was, you know, she was totally in that world, you know, absolutely.
And can you describe the highest values?
Well, it has to do with the study of music, to try to get to the real quality of the character of the music, but also very good playing. I mean, you don't, you know, if you're going to be a professional chamber music group or whatever, you know, you there's a certain kind of international standard that you strive for. And I noticed with her students too, that on whatever level, and I do feel that there's the difference of attitude with students, and even on a very young development level, she really instilled that kind of attitude, I think, that one strives for. I mean, she was enthusiastic, she was supportive, but she also really, in her teaching, demanded the excellence. In other words, that one be working toward one's potential and toward the potential of the music. I mean, the communication of the music. That's for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
What was Berklee's sort of musical environment like? You've described the chamber music and how integral that was.
That was our world. That was our world. I mean, it was a chamber music world. I know for myself, the Griller Quartet came to the university in 1949, and I became very involved in that. Before that, I'd had some opportunities to play solos and things like that, but I you know, was completely absorbed by the music making of the quartet. And we were very lucky here in Berkeley, because we had at the university I can remember going to quartet concerts from the time I was about 5 or 6 and just loving them. There were Coolidge quartets at the university, and so we heard all of the quartets that came through. I remember the Old London Quartet and the Budapest, of course, and then the Grillers came as a resident quartet at the university, and they were there from 49 until on in the 60s. And so you had an environment, and I got bitten by the quartet bug when I was a teenager, so that's all I wanted to do. There was no question in my mind. And it, you know, one does get bitten by the chamber music bug, and of course that was a way that we were so compatible, you know, and in that whole environment, because she was definitely bitten by the chamber music bug too. You know, it was very much our lives, you know. The orchestra was wonderful, the San Francisco Symphony. That was, you know, we'd go weekly to concerts and that sort of thing. And, you know, there, as with anything, there's much more of everything now. I was just saying to somebody today, you know, there's so many youth orchestras in the area. When I was growing up, it was only the Young People's Symphony. That was the only orchestra that was here. So that the environment, but I think Berkeley and the Bay Area has always been a very rich place in terms of, and support of, in the schools, support and of the arts, and unfortunately, that is one of the things that has changed quite a lot. Yeah. So.
Well, how did Anne's vision to begin the school get set into motion?
Well, it was this issue that you know, the students just didn't have you know, an integral part of their lives as being able to be devoted to music, you know. And actually, I remember her talking about it once over the kitchen table and talking about starting a school. And she was talking about it very seriously. I mean, I knew that she wasn't just, you know, saying, oh, wouldn't this be a nice idea? No, she was really trying to figure out how it could happen. And I thought, well, how wonderful. Of course, she had something of the model of the Menuhin School in England in mind, too, which is, you know, and I said, how wonderful, but how does one ever do something like that, you know? I mean, I couldn't fathom it, you know, because it's complex. It's very complex. But then I learned and realized that she grew up. Her parents had a boys' school in Edinburgh, so it was in her bones. I mean, she was around it. She knew the day-to-day workings of it. So then when one realized that, you know, you knew that her instinct and her knowledge was right there from having grown up with that. And she, that first year, after some of those conversations we had, it didn't start, but it was the following year, and she got to work. She started talking about it, trying to find people, and she was very lucky. I don't remember the name of the person. I did meet her, somebody that she met in San Francisco, rather by accident. And of course, Anne was so good at starting conversations with people, and so on, getting to know people fairly fast. And somehow talked with her school, and this person said, oh, well, I know just the people that would be so wonderful to have, and that was the Mancinis, of course. And so then, and all the contacts got made, and then I can't remember how Hannah Zender came into it, but I think maybe one of her daughters was studying with Anne or something, and she was perfect too, because she was so devoted, you know. And actually she was the one ultimately, even though it started in the basement of the church there, which was wonderful. I mean, that was a ideal place, and we just the feeling of it, and so on. And we used to play concerts for the school a lot, you know, and benefits or whatever, you know, and various things. But it was just with 12 students, I think, to start with, and the Mancinis, of course, were also perfect, you know, in terms of human beings, people, knowledge, all of the things that could have the balance, the academic side and the balance of things. But of course, as it is now, I always loved that the very first periods of the day had to do with instrumental things and chamber music. That made a lot of sense, and obviously with very good, it's been proven obviously by the graduates, is very good academic standards too, and ideas and so on. So it was a hands-on, you know, day by day building question. But boy, we were all behind it. That's for sure. We were really excited about the idea.
And yeah. Why do you think this was the time? Why do you think it took off?
Well, I mean, it was, you know, in spirit, it was successful. I mean, it was probably not easy at all, and probably a worry at times to get the support and all those kinds of things, I'm sure, and I'm sure it still is. But I think it had to do, you know, Berkeley had a very rich, supportive music program in the schools. I knew I grew up with very good music in the schools. So much of that was cut you know, I don't remember exactly the timing, but it had to do with all the various economic ups and downs of things, and so it would be cut. So there was very, very much less in the schools, and so people that did want their kids to have something of that, this is where they would turn, you know, and where they would, it filled a terrific need, I think, you know, just in terms of and that idea. And also Berkeley is a place, I think, I'm showing my prejudice, I suppose, but Berkeley is a place where there is the possibility to try these things, you know, to have you know, take a new idea, vision, and a new idea, and somehow it is nurtured, it is supported. And, you know, Anne had that talent, that quality of bringing people together. One would see that. She had a good sense of party. She, you know, yes, and that's good, you know, I mean, that was something I always admired, because it's not necessarily in my own makeup, and I always thought, boy, she really, and I just loved the way she would bring people together. And, you know, I still feel that the school has that very much. You know, I love the gatherings and things like that. And there's so much of her spirit really continues on, you know, and it's because many of you have had the influence from her and so on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
When you discussed with Anne about the school, what did she and you have conversations about what to offer in the curriculum? What would be appropriate? Or
I think, you know, I think she was very fortunate in Pierrot, and but, you know, they understood what, say, somebody that's going to be really culturally educated, and, you know, she didn't have the idea that she was going to develop a whole lot of professional musicians or a whole lot of virtuosi or so. She wanted students that music was going to be an important part of their lives, and that it would be given equal importance to all the other educational, you know, standards that we have in our society. And languages, I think, were always important, the appreciation of art, but also the awareness that people needed to have all of the skills so they could go on. Students should have all of the areas so they could go on into good academic futures, and they did. They have. So many of them have gone on. But the other thing that I loved, having taught chamber music in so many of the schools around this area, University of California, Stanford, Conservatory, whenever a Crowden student would come to audition, you knew that they had played chamber music, you know, even if you didn't know they were a Crowden student. But they right away knew what they were doing, you know, and often students will come at the college age, play very well, but not have a clue as to how to play with other people. And this was just something, you know, that's part of what you do here. You know, it's absolutely, yeah.
Is this, can I follow up on that? Is this very unique to Crowden School, or?
Yes.
Menuhin schools, Purcell,
well, yes.
Juilliard also have the chamber sort of emphasis.
Right. Well, no, Juilliard does not have emphasis, a solo emphasis, definitely. Chamber music is much less important. I don't know about the Menuhin school or and so on, but my sense is it probably does, because it's smaller, you know, and the chamber music values are there. No, in some of the big schools, big conservatories in the East Coast, it's definitely on the solo playing. That's something, though, we do have here at the conservatory has followed through, you know, in terms of the importance to chamber music. So, yeah, and you know, if one's a good chamber music player, one also has the potential of being a really superb orchestral player, because you're used to listening and used to doing all those good things too. So, yeah, Anne had the vision. I mean, I keep using that word, but it was not just the day-to-day thing. It's what we're doing this for, and in a larger world too. The human beings she was wanting to help, you know, help people find in themselves and so on. Yeah.
I'm wondering, since you've been so integral to the development of the school, if you have a perspective on those elements on her vision and how the school has perhaps changed or evolved, and what has also stayed the same.
Well, I'd have to give that some thought. I must say, though, I remember once, it was some years ago, Anne was around and so on, going to a spring concert. And you know, when you go to a youth concert, say San Francisco Symphony or someplace where there's a whole audience of kids, and there's some adults that have brought the kids or supervising, but mainly they're in the role of trying to keep all these kids orderly and that sort of thing. You know, it's an interesting challenge and so on. What I noticed about the audience at the Crowden School was that the kids were listening very intently and very interested in their peers, then the other students who were playing, and really listened. It was as if they'd brought their parents to the concert, whereas the other way around. And I remember thinking, okay, that's something you don't often see when you get an audience full of youngsters and so on, that they're really there to listen, you know, and they're really interested and involved and really identifying and so on. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that quality of really listening is related to the emphasis on chamber music as opposed to
and
solo?
No, I wouldn't say that as opposed to solo. No. No, I mean, anyone that's going to be a good player has to listen. You know, that I wouldn't distinguish. No, that's with music. If you don't listen, forget it.
I meant listening to others, like really listening to the other.
I think, I don't know, that's just, no, I think that's more of a value thing. I don't think that's necessarily because of musical training or attitude. I think it's a value thing that they value listening to performances and hearing performances. I have to say there is a little bit, there can be that a little bit, I've noticed that at some other schools far away from here, that some of the younger players are interested in playing themselves, but they're not necessarily, they leave once they've played. In other words, they're not necessarily as interested. So that, you know, but that's not, that's an individual thing. Look, that's choices. I don't want to say that that aspect is a characteristic necessarily, but I just did notice in terms of the students here that they were very involved in what was going on. Yeah, absolutely.
And another question in comparison with Purcell School and Menwin.
I haven't been to those schools, so I don't know.
No, but just they go until high school?
I don't know. You'd have to find that out.
Yeah, I know. I did some research.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so they go up to
all the way
age
through.
18 and
Yeah,
19.
right.
So I was wondering where the middle school sort of
that's true. Well, and you know, felt that was a area where there was not as much you know, already happening, you know. And actually, though, I was involved in some of the early days, as some of those students graduated and went on to high school, where they did not have a chamber music program necessarily or as much. She developed a high school chamber music program. So some of us came in and coached those quartets. And we had some really very good quartets. I mean, excellent quartets. We did some very ambitious things, Death and the Maiden and Dvorak's C major, I remember, and Ravel quartet. I mean, there was really good playing and on a very good level. So she provided, as a community thing, that outlet for some of the students to be able to come back and continue what they had gotten here. And it was some Crowden School students, but it was also, I think, as I remember, there were a few other students that had not come through Crowden. Yeah.
And another comparative question: a lot of these schools are boarding schools, and was there any desire to develop a boarding school, or was it always?
I don't think it had gotten to that. I don't think it was taken to that point. I think there was enough just to be able to have the facilities for the school itself, and then to make the move to this place. And I'm so grateful and it was Hannah Hannah Zender that suggested the school, because it was being used as a daycare place or something like that, or nursery or whatever, I don't know. and it is such a wonderful building. And I remember going around actually with Anne to a few of the other places they were looking at, and as I think about it these years later, this is so ideal. It just has a really good feeling about it, and I think that makes a big difference because it means people like to come here. It's really important. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a lot of thought that went into things. And there was a very good instinct going on among the people, and I must say, the Mancinis, both of them, and Hannah, that was the nucleus of the people, the day-to-day people, and knowing them, knowing the Mancinis still. I mean, they're still wherever they are. That's just them, and it's really appreciating the quality of the best kinds of musical values, artistic values, world values, principles, of thought. So it's very much of a total piece, the whole way of thinking, and it's carried over into the education, I think, here. Mm. It was always interesting too. They obviously, for many of the subjects, they would need to get in people academically for the special subjects. And Anne had a very good instinct, I think, in that way, too, on who to hire, to come in and teach this course or that course. Or, she would get people that were individuals, really individuals. And it sort of made for very lively curriculum, I think. I had the feeling that the kids were pretty interested. They were challenged and interested. Yeah. So.
I wanted to ask you about the 1997 Heidi Castleman Award for Excellence in Chamber Music Education from Chamber Music America. And I wondered if you could share something about why Anne was chosen as recipient.
Well, I was on the board at the time. I think I was president of Chamber Music America at the time. And it was a no-brainer. I mean, because how many schools of this kind are there in this country? And in fact, yeah, I mean, that was not a problem at all. Once I was able to talk about things, and I think we may have even taken some performance videos or something just to show something of what what was going on here, and people loved the idea. It was not a difficult thing to get through. Let me tell you, there was absolutely no contest. Anne was a natural, and I was so delighted too because she deserved the recognition. It had been going for quite a while at that point. And so she'd absolutely proven it, the school had proven itself and was growing in a very integral kind of way. And yeah, I was really glad that happened, yeah. So.
I was also wondering if there were stories you'd like to share about Colin Hampton and the Griller Quartet. Mm-hmm.
Well, again, as I say, there was that connection, the personal connection, because Ian Hampton, who was a wonderful cellist, had been the cellist in the Edinburgh Quartet, where Anne was, I don't know how many years, but quite a few years before she joined the Netherlands Quartet, chamber orchestra, which brought her out here. And so it was in correspondence with Ian that she decided to come to this area, that he was encouraging her that this was a very fertile area, to be able to come and make a musical life. And so there was the connection. And I don't know whether, of course, the Griller Quartet was an English quartet, and I don't know whether she ever heard them in England, but at the earlier period, the quartet, I think, broke up in the middle 60s. But she could very well have heard them because she was a student at the Royal Academy. And so she could very well have heard them in England and known them because they were the big quartet in England for a lot of years there. And that was that first chamber music evening was at Colin's house. So it was a natural. I mean, they just hit it off. They were the same kind of people that just loved not only loved chamber music and had, you know, a total commitment to it, but also loved communication and parties and just all the crazy things that musicians do when they get together. What can I say? And of course, Colin was totally supportive of the school. I mean, he you know, he was 200%, you know, cheering section for her in terms of everything she was doing and so on. So yeah, that was a natural character. And Anne was wonderful with him in his last years of, you know, helping him go places and do things together. I mean, they had a really natural communication and a really natural musical. They were on the same wavelength musically. Their value system with music and really appreciated what he had been, what he had done in his life, and that's, you know, that's a valuable thing. That's a very valuable thing. Yeah. So.
I think there was also, maybe you can speak to this. There was also they were both great teachers.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think they fed off of one another in that way.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it was very lively. They would stimulate each other, absolutely. You know, you know, it's amazing because I remember a student of mine, a young cellist, very talented kid. He's the first cellist in Europe somewhere or other now in an orchestra. But I had him go have a lesson with Colin, I think on a Beethoven sonata. This young kid, he must have been. Maybe he was 13, 14 by then, but I'd had him since he was about 8 or so. I was at that point touring enough that his teacher called me. He'd been with a Suzuki teacher and called me and asked me to listen to him. And I said, well, you know, he's only 8. That's really important that the college students, if you go away for a week or two, they can handle it, but an 8-year-old really needs the regular work. And so I went, but I said I'd be glad to listen and advise him. And I'm not sure which order I should put this, but he was so cute and so talented that what could I do? That was that. But anyway, as he developed, I sent him to Colin to have a coaching on a Beethoven sonata. And afterward, I said, what did you learn? He said, I remember everything he said. In other words, it was said with such conviction. It was all the ideas, but more than that, he got very much to the essence of music when he was working with a person. And I don't know, actually thinking back on it, I'm not sure quite how. It wasn't just verbal, but he was very, very descriptive and verbal. But because there was such a passionate connection with the music himself and the conviction of it, that he got it across one way or another. And also very much one learned, I'm thinking with Beethoven, learned the respect for what the composer was trying to get down, you know, in the blueprint. That's all we have. The score is the blueprint, and then you need to put all of the flesh on it, you know, and make it come to life. And he had such a passionate connection with music himself that was, you know, it infused the person with that same desire, sort of thing. Yeah.
I think too. I'm wondering what you think of this. Do you feel that as teachers, Anne and Colin both, they saw the passion in the music, but they also saw the passion, you know, or latent passion in the student?
Well, very much would bring it to life. Yeah, absolutely, would absolutely bring. I remember hearing Anne. I think I was probably waiting for when I was coaching the high school students, and I was a little earlier so, and Anne was teaching a lesson. This was at the other school, old school, and I could hear her just, you know, down the hallway teaching a lesson, and this boy was playing quite well. I mean, he was really doing well, and she said, no, you're not getting the music. You have to dig deeper, and you can't just play the notes. Notes are nothing. You need to really find the phrasing, find the feeling and the sense of the music, you know. And she was really ticking him off, you know, and she was able to tick people off. I mean, even if you, I have a sense, I never got ticked off by her, but I have a sense as the students understood that she was doing it because it mattered so much, not just to her, it mattered so much per se, and that she was not attacking them. She was wanting absolutely for the person to bring the best to it and find the best in it, and I think she had a pretty good instinct as to what a person was capable of. So she would insist that they find that. I think she had a good instinct of that. Yeah.